I mean, who actually knows? I mean, first of all, all of a sudden, oh no, hang on, there's all these things saying it could not be. It is really, really hard to work out what is the truth. I suppose it's always been that way. It's just the amount of contradictory stuff that you get there and the different avenues you get it through now is so overwhelming. I don't, I agree with the nasty father of Ailes there. Don't trust anybody when it comes to facts that come through some source you don't know.
Yeah, but don't teach your kids that lesson by letting them fall to the ground.
No. I remember the interview with Kellyanne Conway, who is a close consultant of Trump, where she quite seriously described her position as alternative facts. Like with a straight face on television, as though that was acceptable.
It's real Emperor's New Clothes stuff, isn't it? No one sort of starts to question it. They're starting to now.
We didn't get it wrong. We just presented alternative facts.
Well, do you know what it's led the rise to? Of course, it was Jon Stewart, now it's Trevor Noah and Bill Maher and people like that. Is people are actually going to political comedians to get an accurate picture of what's going on.
John Oliver,
all these people to get a balanced view. It's quite extraordinary that they're the ones that are the counterbalance to your Foxes and all the rest of it. And I guess they come across as more left than right, but if you're going to give it a label. But I think it's just nonsense versus not nonsense. And these are the vehicles that people are going to get some facts straight, because people like John Oliver will go through a whole lot of facts, Trevor, a whole lot of facts comedically, but there'll be a whole lot of counterbalance to what's going on. It's given a rise to this whole new industry, if you like. I mean, there's always been political satire and political commentary of a comedic nature, but it's gone up a notch and it has to. It has to be there. It's not only hopefully entertaining, but it's actually providing a real societal important societal function. Yeah,
exactly. We will finish up on a lighter story. This is about revenge. We mentioned it at the top of the program. Have you exacted revenge, and have you had revenge exacted on you? This comes out of a story when an hilarious collection of images was published in the Daily Mail, and people revealed their most ingenious acts of revenge. I've heard the stories of, pinning fish under the floorboards of a house. And again, I wonder whether these are urban myths or not. I don't know. Andrew, have you ever exacted revenge or had revenge exacted on you?
I can't recall exacting revenge, at least not in a premeditated way. I've been, when I lived in Sydney, in a car with a bouncer doorman who was hired by Chinese people, to break into a car, and I was sitting with them, lift up a dashboard and put a dead fish under the dashboard and bolt it back down again to stick the car out, and also it's bad luck. And I've got to be careful of the bounds of good taste here. When I was a single man too, and I don't know who did this, I found a sex toy super glued to my letterbox one morning.
Good taste be damned, that's quite funny.
I don't know I don't know who it's from to this day. I don't know what I had done to get that. Maybe someone had the wrong address. I don't know. But
if you have any information, please email the panel.
It's about 20 years ago, to be fair. But to this day, I don't know how I got there.
Got about 30 seconds, Susan. Have you?
Yeah, no, look, I haven't. I think the best revenge is to walk away with your head held high and just never look back.
Yeah, I've heard people say that success is the best form of revenge as well. Yeah. Lovely to talk to you two today.
Thanks for revenge.
Yeah, good on you. Lovely to have you in the studio. Nice to meet you, Susan.
Thanks,
you too,
darling.
Andrew. And the panel will be back with Jim Mora on Monday.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, 3 men and a teenage boy charged over the robbery of the South Auckland dairy. Donald Trump, who said Obama wasn't American and Clinton should be in jail, asked for the witch hunt to end. A privacy breach at the Social Development Ministry ends in a high-ranking resignation. The PM sells brand NZ in Hong Kong, religious instruction in school, and what a ministry report warned 15 years ago, honouring the treaty by displaying it permanently. Wayne Smith blows the full-time whistle on himself. And we investigate the bullying of a 10-year-old girl to find a rather different story. Thank you for being with us. Checkpoint on a Friday night. Let's really savour the pips. And then Katrina has the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batt in Aho. The privacy breach at the Ministry of Social Development earlier this year has claimed a high-level casualty. The Ministry's acting Deputy Chief Executive, Murray Edridge, has resigned because staff under his watch did not adequately protect personal information provided by community groups. The breach potentially allowed one ministry contractor to see another's information. The Green Party Social Development spokesperson, Jan Logie, says it's good that Mr Edridge is taking responsibility, but an accountability ultimately lies with the minister in charge.
It's very clear from the Privacy Commissioner's report that the minister didn't ask the questions that needed to be asked and didn't put things in place to ensure the safety of that information.
Jan Logie, the Ministry's Chief Executive Brendan Boyle, says Mr Edridge has advised he had no direct involvement in the actions of his team, but is taking responsibility for them. The police are not ruling out laying further charges relating to the death of Auckland teenager Stephen Dudley. Stephen died in June 2013 after a pair of brothers he went to school with attacked him. The coroner has found he had an underlying heart problem which caused a heart attack induced by the assault. The brothers were originally charged in connection with the death, but eventually discharged without conviction. The Waitemata District Commander, Tusha Penny, says Stephen's death was thoroughly investigated at the time, but in light of the coroner's findings, the police may review the case. A man whose passenger died when he crashed his car while being chased by the police told officers he was taking her to hospital at the time. Damien Lawson, who's 44, was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today to 5 years in prison for reckless driving causing the death of the 21-year-old woman. He told the police she was his fiancée and he was taking her to Kenepuru Hospital in Porirua because she'd threatened to take her own life. However, Justice Thomas says he had rightly taken full responsibility for the fatality.
You decided to drive while under the influence of drugs. You drove recklessly, trying to evade the police. The appropriate course would have been for you to ask the police for help if you had indeed been trying to take the victim to Kenepuru Hospital.
Justice Thomas, the woman's mother, says the death was totally preventable and she hopes that during his time in prison, Lawson will never forget the devastation he has caused. The fungal disease myrtle rust has now been confirmed on 5 properties in 2 regions. 2 new cases have been found in Taranaki today, adding to the one already identified there, and 2 in Northland. Jessie Chang reports.
The Ministry for Primary Industries says a nursery in Waitara and a garden centre in downtown New Plymouth have both been infected with the disease. Its response controller David Yard says it's not looking likely that the myrtle rust can be eradicated. He says scientists think it has been growing slowly on trees since spores were blown in from Australia. Mr Yard says it's likely other properties are also infected, but the symptoms aren't showing yet. He says the rust can affect 23 different New Zealand plant species, including pohutukawa and lata. Ko Jessie Chang, Aho.
The Airline Pilots Association wants an urgent review of the rules governing drones. Its president, Tim Robinson, says the rules set in 2015 offer little or no protection to the public or drone users and are overdue for review. He says members want tighter regulation, including the mandatory registration of drones and the setting of similar rules to those followed by trained pilots. 3 weeks ago, a tourist flew a drone directly above the landing pads at Fran Joseph's Glacier Country heliport. Mr Robinson says his association will debate the use of drones at its annual conference next month. The Transport Agency has pushed back the expected reopening of State Highway 1 south of Kaikoura to the end of this month. Visitors have had to take the inland route to and from the town since heavy rain at Easter brought fresh slips down on the highway between Peketa and Goose Bay. The agency says crews were hopeful of clearing the debris by next week, but a large amount still needs to be removed. The President of the Philippines has signed an order banning smoking in all public places. Rodrigo Duterte's executive order declares all public places throughout the country as off-limits to smoking, whether indoors or outdoor. Playgrounds, sporting areas, footpaths, schools, workplaces, government offices, restaurants and other businesses all come under the scope of the ban. Mr Duterte, who used to be a heavy smoker, kicked the habit decades ago after developing health problems. It's 5:05. To sport, and New Zealand Rugby expects to have appointed a replacement for long-serving All Blacks assistant coach Wayne Smith before the Rugby Championship in August. Smith announced today that he's standing down from the job. While New Zealand Rugby will advertise worldwide, coach Steve Hansen expects there'll be several local candidates.
I think you've always got to be open with your thinking. Obviously, you've got some people, not just a person, but some people that are clearly indicating that they're possibly ready. But you've got to be flexible in your thinking. You don't know what's going to drop out of the sky. So we haven't shoulder tapped anybody.
Steve Hansen. The organisers of tonight's Super Rugby match between the Chiefs and Crusaders in Fiji are confident of another bumper crowd. The Chiefs won last year 23-13 in front of a sold-out crowd of 20,000 in pouring rain in Suva. The Wellington Phoenix football coaches Des Buckingham and Chris Greenacre have failed to be appointed to the role permanently. The pair were appointed as co-coaches after the mid-season departure of Ernie Merrick. The club's general manager David Dome says a contract has been signed with an overseas coach, but there'll be no announcement on who it is until next month. Dome says 15 players from last season's squad are contracted for the next season. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Barry Gibbon getting ready to celebrate the centennial of Waiuku's Town Hall with a variety show. In the Town Hall, of course, Country Life meets a couple of women with a blanket solution to low wool prices. Julie Fawai, manager of the Pacific Fusion juggernaut Tavaka, selects this week's mixtape, and we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the little things in life. On Nights, sweating the small stuff with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow from Northland to Taranaki and Taihape, including Bay of Plenty. Occasional showers heavy for a time tomorrow with snow about the desert road, then clearing in the afternoon and evening. Gisborne fine today, a few showers around midday tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Nelson. Mainly fine today, a cold southerly change early tomorrow with rain and snow to 600 metres. They're mostly clearing, but showers remaining about Wairarapa and Mahia Peninsula. Marlborough and Canterbury, a strong cold southerly change this evening with rain and snow to 200 metres for a time in the south. Becoming mostly fine tomorrow morning, but snow showers and southwest gales on Banks Peninsula. Bulla and Westland showers with snow to 600 metres, clearing tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, frequent showers with thunder and hail and snow to low levels tonight. Severe gales about coastal Southland and Clutha, easing a little later today. The Chatham Islands showers heavy at times with thunder tomorrow, westerly gales overnight. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Busy program tonight. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on it, the PM selling New Zealand and Hong Kong. President Trump says witch hunt. The Manawatu Gorge, scheduled to reopen yesterday, still closed. Wayne Smith, credited with being the backroom brains in the All Blacks coaching squad, is calling it a day. And the country's founding documents are going on permanent display. But we begin tonight with the story of a 10th birthday party. It is a story that's gone global after the child's mother told Fairfax and NZME that her daughter, who suffered from epilepsy, had been severely bullied and nobody in her class wanted to come to her birthday party. A Facebook page was set up in support of the little girl, and presents, money and messages of support came in from New Zealand and overseas. One question that didn't seem to have been answered was, what was the school doing to deal with such terrible bullying? Checkpoint wanted to ask the girls' school, and as Bridget Burke reports, there are no outstanding bullying issues at the school, and at the school anyway, no invitations were ever sent out.
Rachel says she set up a Facebook page calling for messages of support for the 9-year-old girl after hearing her entire class had turned down an invitation to come to her 10th birthday party. She said she was upset to hear the child had been bullied and called a retard by her school friends. The Facebook page has grown to more than 5,000 followers. Over the past week, hundreds of children have sent birthday video messages. An Indian couple posted a photo of themselves wishing her happy birthday on behalf of 1.3 billion Indians, and an Auckland classroom sent personal messages of support from every child. On the Facebook page, the child's mother, Tony Ann, or Liz as she's also known, posted her bank account details calling for cash donations. And Rachel says the cash and presents flooded in.
Maybe over 500, but I'm not sure. A lot of money, donations. I know there's most likely money in birthday cards.
The popularity of the Facebook post gave Tony Ann the idea of holding a surprise party for her daughter on Sunday. A hall was donated, a hairdresser, a ferry and security guards volunteered their services, and a tablet, a plane ride and Ed Sheeran tickets were donated. But Rachel says she discovered this morning the child's mother made the story up.
No invitations were sent for a party and she wasn't called a retard.
Stacey Williams spent hours making a multi-tiered musical themed cake with a replica of the child sitting on top holding a love heart and a number 10.
I really hope that's not the case, but at the end of the day, you know, paper trails, they are the way to go, you know, and social media is basically another way of paper trailing things. So if Mum is if she is misleading people, that would be a huge shame, and I really, really hope that this doesn't impact.
Tina's child goes to the same school as the birthday girl.
I said to my daughter, is a bully? And she said, no. I said, well, does get bullied? Because my daughter's quite an outspoken little girl. She sticks up for anybody, you know, if she knows they've been picked on, things like that. She's been taught about bullying and stuff, and she knows. And she said, no. She said, no one bullies her. I just think it's just gone a bit overboard. I mean, I've seen it where people have donated 150, you know, and it's probably gotten to the thousands of dollars where they've donated money.
Rachel, who instigated the Facebook post, says she's gutted and feels terrible about the situation.
It's nothing to do with she doesn't even know about the party at the moment. She doesn't know about the gifts. She doesn't know about the presents. She doesn't know that the party's even happening. Like, the worst bit for me is that when people find out about this, like, I think there's only 5,000 on. This is going to make everybody lose their faith in anybody. But to me, that's the most heartbreaking part. All these kids, I hope people don't tell their kids so, but all these adults that have donated presents from all over the world, I mean, it's hard to trust anyone these days anyway, but this is just going to ruin, like, everyone's faith in everyone. And especially what I don't want it to affect is people trying to fight bullying, because that's a true story. Like, there's kids every day getting bullied. You just see on the net people dying from being bullied. And gosh, now when people say they're getting bullied, you know, I hope people still believe them. I just think people all over the world are going to be affected by this. Like, so many people. I've had people that only had a small amount of money and have donated.
Wanganui woman Mary says she's known the child and her mother for 6 years. She says she's had concerns about the safety of the child and her home environment.
I feel very sorry for the school and the rest of the kids at school that was dealt with. It was one little isolated incident. She actually hasn't been bullied at the school. There was one incident that school thought they had resolved, but Liz will be trying to make as much of a earn out of it as possible.
Mary says children in the girls' class also had concerns about the child's home environment and for that reason had politely declined previous party invitations to the child's house.
They sent the little girl with a note to say, look, thank you very much, but I've got another thing on and that was prior to this and I'm unable to attend, and she took a present.
Checkpoint has chosen not to name the child's school. The head of the Board of Trustees said he could not speak to the child's personal situation for privacy reasons, but the school did not condone bullying.
The board does have a robust bullying policy in line with the latest recommendations of the Ministry of Education and uses bullying prevention and response, a guide for schools, as our guide to develop this policy. And these values are both pro-social and academic. Our values are manaakitanga, always being respectful, haumarutanga, always being responsible, and akonga, always being a learner. Our school is an enthusiastic, positive behaviour for learning school, and we proactively teach and reward pro-social skills. We seek to ensure the hauora and well-being of all of our students is developed and maintained, and when issues do occur, the school follows up all concerns and uses a restorative process. The school will be participating in the National Pink Shirt Day on the 26th of May, and the focus being taught and rewarded is to be an upstander, being able to stand up for yourself or a friend and being able to seek help when you need it.
The child's mother, Tony Ann, or Liz, declined repeated requests to be interviewed today. In the meantime, Stacey Williams says she's still expecting Tony Ann to pick up the cake.
At the end of the day, you know, that little girl still deserves something. So that's okay with me.
For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Well, our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has just visited Tony Ann's home. Here's what happened.
Yeah, howdy, it's Robin Martin here from Radio New Zealand News.
Yeah, no, sorry,
I beg your pardon, I didn't...
No, not introduced, thank you. Hello?
We want to talk to you about what's happened with the gifts and the money and what's happening with the party.
Speak to us about it. We've got another one on Monday, so no more, thanks. We've had enough drama on Facebook from other people.
So what's happening? You wanted to...
You can see our Facebook yourself and you'll see it on the paper on Monday. Thank you.
Do you want to tell us your side of the story?
I will be on Monday.
It's Robin Martin. Let's go to Washington now, where Donald Trump is insisting he's the victim of a witch hunt, a media beat up and fake news. What he wants to do, he says, is get back to running the country. The US President today faced the media for the first time since the Justice Department announced the appointment of a special counsel to take over the investigation into alleged Russian interference in the US election and any possible ties between Russia and the Trump campaign team. Here's CNN's Sarah Murray.
Believe me, there's no collusion. Russia is fine.
President Trump seething today over the news that a special counsel will oversee the FBI's Russia investigation, carefully insisting that he did not personally collude with the Russians during the 2016 presidential campaign.
Well, I respect the move, but the entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign, but I can always speak for myself and the Russians, zero.
Many in Washington cheered the news that former FBI Director Robert Mueller would serve as special counsel in the investigation into potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russians. But the president stewed.
I think it divides the country. I think we have a very divided country because of that and many other things.
Trump also sharply denying that he ever asked ousted FBI Director James Comey to back off his investigation into retired General Michael Flynn.
Did you at any time urge former FBI Director James Comey in any way, shape, or form to close or to back down the investigation into Michael Flynn? And also, as you look back...
No. Next question.
And the president dismissing the notion that any of his actions could warrant criminal charges or impeachment.
I think it's totally ridiculous. Everybody thinks so.
Trump's defiant tone on Thursday, a far cry from the measured statement the president released as soon as a special counsel was announced. On Wednesday night, Trump simply wrote, "As I have stated many times, a thorough investigation will confirm what we already know. There was no collusion between my campaign and any foreign entity. I look forward to this matter concluding quickly." But even as he decried the Russia probe as a witch hunt today, Trump appeared eager to turn the focus back to his agenda.
There was no collusion, and everybody, even my enemies, have said there is no collusion. So we want to get back and keep on the track that we're on, because the track that we're on is record-setting.
The president using his appearance with the Colombian president to tout his upcoming foreign trip.
Tomorrow, as you know, I'm going to Saudi Arabia, going to Israel, I'm going to Rome, and we have the G7. We have a lot of great things going on.
And devoting part of his day to the hunt for a new FBI director, as former Senator Joe Lieberman emerges as an early frontrunner for the job.
It was Sarah Murray from CNN with that report, 90 minutes past 5. A privacy breach at the Social Development Ministry has led to the resignation of a high-ranking public servant. Acting Deputy Chief Executive Murray Edridge is quitting the ministry, saying staff under his watch did not adequately protect client information. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
In March, the ministry announced community groups such as Women's Refuge would have to hand over clients' personal data if they wished to get funding. Some data was stored in a temporary IT system, but that was shut down in April when it was realised one ministry contractor could see another's information. A subsequent investigation found the IT project lacked proper leadership and resourcing, and its security risks weren't properly checked. The ministry's chief executive, Brendan Boyle, says Mr Edridge is taking the fall for the blunder.
Murray has advised me that he will take responsibility for the actions of his team at the time, despite having no direct involvement in those actions. In taking this course of action, I commend Murray for demonstrating the integrity and leadership that we have come to know him for.
The Green Party's social development spokesperson, Jan Logie, says it's honourable that Mr Edridge is taking responsibility, but she says ultimately any accountability lies with the minister in charge.
It's very clear from the Privacy Commissioner's report that the minister didn't ask the questions that needed to be asked and didn't put things in place to ensure the safety of that information. And, you know, everything I've heard is that actually it was the minister that was just pushing for this to go through despite concerns being raised.
Jan Logie doesn't think the resignation will change anything at the Social Development Ministry.
If you've still got that minister in place, you've still got the intent to go ahead with the policy, and we haven't, we still haven't seen a privacy impact assessment that's completed for this project. So as one person falling on their sword, it's hard to have confidence that anything's going to change.
The Public Service Association's National Secretary, Glenn Barclay, agrees that it's unfair Murray Edridge has had to take the full blame for the ministry's situation.
The main driver is, government policy around this, because government can put quite an inordinate amount of pressure on ministries and departments when their pet policies are involved, and I think that this is an example of that.
At the time of the breach, the minister, Anne Tolley, said she was furious and that the ministry should have overseen the project better given previous IT issues. She has placed the collection of client data from community groups on hold until a better system is developed. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
A man whose reckless driving led to the death of the young woman travelling with him had 5 previous convictions for similar kinds of offending. Damien Lawson, who was 44, was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington this morning, jailed for 5 years. His passenger, who was 21, died from injuries she suffered when Lawson crashed as he sped away from a chasing police officer in May last year. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May filed this report.
Shortly before the crash, Damien Lawson and the crash victim, whose name has been permanently suppressed, had been smoking methamphetamine in the car. When the police approached, Lawson sped away, crashing into a motorway overbridge, but Justice Thomas said his dreadful driving did not end there as he attempted to evade the officer.
You drove in excess of 100 kilometres per hour, overtaking a bus on the wrong side of the road, narrowly missing a head-on collision. You overtook another vehicle on a blind corner. A car came around the corner. This caused you to swerve in an attempt to miss it. You were travelling at least 107 kilometres per hour.
At that stage, Lawson lost control of the car, crashing through a metal fence before hitting a large pohutakawa tree. Justice Thomas said it caused the victim's seat on the passenger side to collapse to about 1/3 its original size. She said the woman suffered a range of injuries, including multiple rib fractures, brain contusions and lacerations to her head, and she died during surgery. Justice Thomas said Lawson told the police the dead woman was his fiancée, the love of his life. He claimed they had spent a couple of days together before the crash, but when she threatened to take her own life, he decided to drive her to hospital in Porirua. Lawson told the police he could not find the hospital and had texted a friend seeking the address shortly before the pursuit began.
You stress, however, your acceptance of full responsibility, and it is appropriate you do so. You decided to drive while under the influence of drugs. You drove recklessly, trying to evade the police. The appropriate course would have been for you to ask the police for help if you had indeed been trying to take the victim to Kenipuru Hospital.
Justice Thomas set a 6-year sentence starting point, but gave Lawson discounts for his guilty plea, his remorse and acceptance of responsibility for what had happened. She said he had also suffered severe injuries in the crash.
You broke your neck, fractured your back, received several facial fractures and skull fractures. You have permanent damage to your vision and spent some 2.5 months in the acute brain injury rehabilitation unit. You say you have no desire to drive ever again.
Justice Thomas also disqualified Lawson from driving for 5 years, which will begin when he is released from prison. In a statement released by the police, the victim's mother, whose name is also suppressed, said her daughter's death was totally preventable and she lost her life due to Lawson's bad choices. She said she hopes Lawson's time in prison results in him never forgetting the hurt, harm and devastation he has caused. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
3 men and a teenage boy have appeared in court today, charged over the violent machete-wielding robbery of a South Auckland dairy. They are charged jointly with Tuesday night's aggravated robbery of the Kingsford supermarket in Mangere, which Checkpoint covered at length last night, of course. Our reporter Carla Penman was at court and joins us on the phone now. Hi, Carla. What happened in court?
Well, today was quite a long, drawn-out kind of day because the 2 arrests were made overnight and then a further 2 were made mid-morning. So that took a while for the paperwork to get in, etc. But all 4 of them appeared in a youth court this afternoon. One of them was as young as 15. So because of that, we are unable to actually report what really went on in that. But we can say that one of the bail applications was denied and that the fact that they all appeared and were all... have been remanded in custody to appear next Thursday.
OK. Any family support, any of that kind of thing that you can tell us about?
Yes. All of the 4 had family in court. One by one, as they all entered the dock, there was immediate family support for them. And the mother of the 15-year-old, she got particularly upset, cursing when he was remanded in custody and yelling out, "Love you, baby," as well.
Carla Penman, who was there. Lots of suppressions cover the youth court, of course. Thank you, Carla. We appreciate it. Let's change subject entirely now with the time at 5:26. The country's founding documents will now permanently be on display at He Tohu, an exhibition inside Wellington's National Library. The Treaty of Waitangi, the Declaration of Independence and the Women's Suffrage Petition were all moved about a month ago from National Archives to the National Library. The first official open day is tomorrow. Today was the official launch, though. So, along went our visual journalist Rebecca Parsons-King and our reporter Jacob McSweeney.
The official opening began this morning with a waiata, a karakia and speeches. Internal Affairs Minister Peter Dunn says many people will see links to their own family history in the documents.
I'm delighted to have my own connection to that. I recently discovered that my great-grandmother signed the women's suffrage petition. I've spotted her signature and I feel very proud of that moment. It gives me a connection in just the same way as our iwi leaders, when we viewed the treaty, spotted connections. And it's that ongoing thread that makes this a very powerful exhibition.
As only the 3rd woman Governor-General, Dame Patsy Reddy, says she has a particular interest in having the 1893 women's suffrage petition easily accessible.
The passage of the Electoral Act 1893 represented a monumental shift in human rights. We should heed Kate Shepherd's call to exercise such a hard-won right. She said, "Do not think your single vote does not matter much. The rain that refreshes the ground is made up of single drops."
The room now holding the documents is inspired by Wakahuia, or a treasure box built from West Coast Rimu out of the Kahurangi National Park. The cabinets holding the 3 fragile documents have climate control settings that ensure their long-term preservation. The room is surrounded by an interactive exhibition aimed at educating young people and telling the stories behind the documents. He Tohu was developed and created by government and Māori leaders. One of those leaders is Ngāpuhi Chair Sunny Tau, who took aim at how the treaty has been taught in schools.
English kings, the unification of Germany and the independence of Nigeria, I can talk to you about that all day. But the Treaty of Waitangi was never, ever, or still is not, taught in our schools.
He says the opening of the exhibition must be a stepping stone to better educating this country's children about the treaty.
It's about time these things were brought out of the cabinets. They've been too long in there. I'm bold as to say that they've been deliberately obfuscated at the time. We need to take this from here. We don't sit on this here. We take this and teach it in our schools.
Tainui Chairman Rahui Papa says Te Tohu is a place where anyone can go and learn about the country's most important documents.
We've certainly been thinking about, as iwi chairs and in our various iwi, is about the immigrants coming into this country and understanding what the actual platforms of this country is. One of the keys about today is opening up Te Whakaputanga, Te Tiriti and the petition for people to come and see the actual foundations of New Zealand.
Te Tohu will be open 6 days of the week and entry is free. I te whanganui a tara mo te otaka o te ahi ko Jacob McSweeney. Tēnei.
Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, the Prime Minister's in Hong Kong drumming up foreign corporate interest in investing in New Zealand infrastructure, religious instruction in schools and what a ministry report warned 15 years ago. Wayne Smith blows a full-time whistle on himself. Giles Beckford joins us in person in Auckland for the first time since Checkpoint began, the new incarnation of Checkpoint. It's lovely to have you here, Giles. And much more. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101. You can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and we are on Twitter and Facebook. And following the consummate professionalism of Ali Jones an hour ago, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to report that we are going to the 5:30 headlines at 5:30.
Yeah, okay, just
enjoy it.
The Greens are calling for the Minister of Social Development to take responsibility after a high-level executive resigned over a privacy breach. The acting Deputy Chief Executive, Murray Edridge, has quit because staff did not adequately protect the personal information of contractors. Jan Logie says any accountability lies with the Minister. The coroner's report into the death of Auckland teenager Stephen Dudley may lead to further charges. Stephen died in June 2013 after two brothers he went to school with attacked him. The coroner has found he had an underlying heart problem which caused a heart attack induced by the assault. The brothers were eventually discharged without conviction. A man whose passenger died when he crashed his car while being chased by the police told officers he was taking her to hospital at the time. Damien Lawson, who's 44, was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today to 5 years in prison for reckless driving causing the death of the 21-year-old woman. Justice Thomas said he had rightly taken full responsibility for the fatality. Myrtle rust has now been confirmed on 5 properties in 2 regions. 2 new cases have been found in Taranaki today and 2 in Northland. The Ministry for Primary Industries Response Controller David Yard says it's not looking likely the fungal disease can be eradicated. The Airline Pilots Association wants an urgent review of the rules governing drones. It says the rules set in 2015 offer little or no protection to the public or drone users, and members want tighter regulation, including mandatory registration. Stop looking at me. The opening of State Highway 1 south of Kaikoura has been pushed back to the end of this month. Heavy rain at Easter brought fresh slips down on the highway, and a large amount of debris still needs to be removed. Sorry about that. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Let's turn to business news now. Thanks, Katrina. Giles Beckford, our business editor, who normally beams in from Wellington, is seated beside me in the Auckland studio.
I usually sit on a bar stool in the morning report, in an empty morning report studio.
Do you?
And we sit there with the little cans in the ears and a little mic that's tucked up here that somebody may have remembered to wipe with the alcohol swab so we don't pick up the earwax from somebody else. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, fine. You're looking very handsome,
I
Giles.
realise it's Casual Friday for you, but we are in the from the big smoke.
Yes, well, you're a business editor, for goodness sake. What's happening in the budget? What do you think?
I was going to talk about Ryman Healthcare and that, but let's just say people who want to find the details about Ryman Healthcare and their solid profit and the other breaking news today, look on our website. It's all there. Looking ahead to next week, we've got 2 big things to look out for. One's the budget on Thursday. Steve enjoys his big day out. A lot, of course, of the goodies have already been revealed, and it's almost now against the law for a finance minister to have any surprises. The one that we should be looking out for, or 2 of them, is the size of the improved numbers that they have in the coffer, right? The economy's doing well, the tax take is bulging the government's coffers, and so the tax take is well up, right? That then goes through to the second one, which we haven't heard much about, which is tax cuts.
Yeah.
Right? I think the general consensus is that there will probably not be significant tax cuts, if any, in this document, but they will lay out the plans for future tax cuts and dangle some generous numbers perhaps. They may tweak the thresholds. In other words, people who have been dragged up, they may raise those thresholds so that more people get a little bit of, at the lower tax rate. And the other thing is working for families, which Stephen Joyce has already said is difficult, it's complex, it's far too complicated. So they may at least give some indication there about where they're going to provide the help for lower and middle income families. And the degree, and this is what the economists and the like will be watching, is to what extent does this put money into the economy, stimulate the economy, a bit of free spending? And that flows through to what the Reserve Bank thinks.
Yeah.
Because if there's a lot of money sloshing around the economy, the Reserve Bank sometimes gets a little bit nervous, thinking it can generate inflation. But if the money goes into infrastructure, as we expect it will do, then the Reserve Bank will be more than happy to just quietly sit on its hands for the next year or so, as they've indicated, and keep interest rates steady at 1.75%.
Stephen Joyce's first budget, Bill English's first budget.
I think they're cut from the same mould.
Yeah, it's going to be first.
I think they're two men from the same school, but expect numbers that are in rude good health.
What's happening at Fonterra, John?
Well, Fonterra next week, they have their meeting where they will give us probably the final payout for this year. We're expecting that it will confirm $6 a kilo, possibly a little bit higher, perhaps $6.20, because we've had a good run of prices in the recent auctions. But more importantly, they'll give us the first indication for the season that's coming. And the expectation is that they will be slightly conservative. They don't want to get too ahead of themselves, as they have been accused of in the past. And from that point of view, don't be surprised if it sits around $6 or just above that.
Right.
But the expectation, once again, from those who follow these things closely, is that the global supply and demand equation, it's roughly coming into balance now. So all those big stocks that were hanging out there and depressing prices, they're sort of been used up. And the overproduction that was occurring in places like Europe and the United States, that's falling. So from that point of view, the best guess is that somewhere around $6.70 might be the end price for the 17-18 season. In the big ballpark number, that's about $1.5 billion added to the economy. That's what pays the taxes. That's what helps Stephen Joyce balance his books.
How'd the markets?
The markets, I can tell you, a positive day for shares. Top 50 index up 20 points, 73.92, and the New Zealand dollar a bit softer, 68.9 US cents, 92.7 Australian.
Charles Bickford, lovely to have you here.
My pleasure, thank you, John.
Off to cut a swathe at the Cannon Awards.
Hoping we come back with a trophy or two.
Good luck. Have a wonderful night. The Prime Minister is in Hong Kong trying to drum up foreign corporate interest in precisely the kind of infrastructure spending Giles was just talking about. Bill English is holding a series of meetings with the heads of major multinational corporations in the hope they will spend here. He's also meeting local economists, selling New Zealand as a safe and rewarding place to do business. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell, is with the PM in Hong Kong.
The cityscape of Hong Kong is a wall of skyscrapers, below which is a sea of building sites. As one of the world's leading financial centres, it's the obvious place to come and tout New Zealand as a good investment. Bill English says Hong Kong is the place to get your finger on the pulse of the global economy.
We just want to make sure that any investor understands we're open to investment subject to New Zealand's rules, but we are particularly focused on infrastructure investment because we believe that New Zealand can be a growing economy with a growing population and that we can invest in sufficient infrastructure to make all that work.
Bill English says while he isn't pitching specific projects, roading needs the most investment. He says his message is that New Zealand is open to investment, trade and migration, but he concedes the country's tight regulations are a bit of a put-off for foreign investors.
There's no question of creating any special conditions for particular investors or Chinese investors or workforces from any particular country. We welcome them to help us get the job done, but they need to meet all our current requirements.
The Hong Kong visit is the final stopover on Bill English's first trip to Asia as Prime Minister. I asked him how different it was travelling in the region in his new role.
Well, it's much broader than when you come as a Finance Minister, where there's a strong focus on detail of issues around government debt and exchange rates and so on. as a Prime Minister, it's a pretty fundamental connection. For instance, a discussion with Prime Minister Abe follows on from the opportunity I've had to meet Mrs Merkel, Mrs May, Premier Li from China. So we're covering all our large countries with whom we have good relationships. This is another one.
Have you enjoyed it? Do you like that it's a bit more hui and a bit less doughy?
Well, it's a different sort of doughy, a bit less about mastering the detail of the numbers and more actually just about the personal relationships. I've been able to spend time with each of these, each of half a dozen leaders of these large countries, and the understanding their world view and being able to show that, I think, is really important to an ongoing relevant relationship. As a small country, we naturally have much more interest in what they do than they have in what we do.
You have a very different style from John Key. Are you kind of cognizant of that when you meet these leaders?
Well, I didn't travel with John, so I don't know exactly how he did it. But he built up a set of very good relationships. Of course, what happens in politics is everyone moves on. So it's a constant job, actually, to reform the relationships. And the context is always different. We now have a context of quite a bit of instability, a fair bit of inward-looking politics around the world, which I think makes New Zealand's positioning as being open and economically successful and increasingly stick out.
Given it's election year and this is your big overseas trip before the election, why did you choose Japan, just given that in terms of optics, China would probably have been bigger and flashier?
Well, we had the visit from the Chinese Premier, which had been scheduled for some time, but really about our trade interests. So if TPP, which can really benefit New Zealand for jobs and incomes, if it's to stay alive, it needs Japanese leadership.
Bill English leaves Hong Kong to return to New Zealand tomorrow. In Hong Kong for Checkpoint, Chris Bramwell.
Thank you, Chris. Mayors and chief executives from the Manawatu, Tararua and Hawke's Bay regions are to meet to discuss the ongoing closure of the Manawatu Gorge. Closed again by more slips, State Highway 3 connects Palmerston North with the farmland and rural service towns to its east and with Hawke's Bay to the northeast. In 2011-12 it was closed for the best part of a year. In 2015, closed for a month, and now it's been closed for almost a month since April 24th. Now, Tracy Collis, the Mayor of the Tararua district, says all the local governments in the most directly affected areas are getting together.
Yes, so between the mayors of the region, Palmerston North, Manawatu, Horizons Regional Council and the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, with the mayors and chief executives to discuss the gorge.
And what will you discuss?
So I want to have a talk about a long-term strategy. When NZTA did their press release on television, they put up some alternative routes that we hadn't discussed with them, and they had some figures around them, and I'd like to have a talk about those now. I guess every time we have a closure, it does create a tension in the community, and when NZTA doesn't meet the given deadlines, that creates more uncertainty, and that uncertainty costs our businesses, commuters going through to work, it takes some extra time, and it just, creates some instability in the community.
And the gorge was meant to be reopened yesterday, wasn't it?
Yes, and they had that subsequent slip, which was, that was devastating. And it got me a little bit nervous, every time they have, some more disturbance, what else does that cause? I had hoped that when they closed it for 3 weeks, it would go through, they would have a look at, every pothole, everything that needed to be done, and they'd open it up and we'd make it through winter perfectly fine. But, the second slip had me really concerned.
Your Tararua, which is the east side of the gorge, so that's Wairarapa, Tararua, Hawke's Bay, and the first little community you hit as you come off the gorge is Woodville, right?
Yes.
And what sort of impact is the gorge closing and remaining closed, and in 2011-12 it was closed for the best part of a year, what sort of impact does that have on a community like Woodville?
So at the moment, when I've actually put road counters on those roads so we can have a look at it with some data around it. So at the moment, the last count was there were 5,728 cars had gone through in the week. Now 1,700 of those had bypassed Woodville. So that's, roughly 30% are choosing the bypass and not going through the township. So that's petrol, that's people buying coffees and stopping and seeing what's in the town. So they've naturally got less traffic flow going through. So the impact is, a third of their turnover.
So that's absolutely measurable. You are able to explicitly say 1/3 of the cars that might normally pass through Woodville don't.
Yes. And that's that's why I asked that the counters were put there so we could have that valid data.
Okay. So what needs to happen, given how often there are closures and given the vulnerability of this road to slips? Anyone who's been through it can picture the rock above them and the potential for slip. What do you want to happen?
My ideal was probably NZTA's biggest budget was that it would be a tunnel, and I have actually discussed that with people and said, well, actually, if we had a tunnel, would you be prepared to pay a toll? And every single person I've spoken to has said yes. For me, a guaranteed connectivity between us and Palmerston North for freight just gives that security. It makes it a quick trip. That connectivity, people can live here. We have very affordable housing and businesses available. We just need that secure link.
Tracy Collis, the Mayor of the Tararua District on the east side of the gorge, of course. Ross Ianson is the Transport Agency's Regional Highway Manager. I asked him when the gorge would reopen.
Well, we have been working really hard on the slip that came down on Sunday, and we have done a lot of sluicing with helicopters today. We will then take 2 or 3 days to clear the material off the road, and we will reinstate guardrail, and all going well. If we have no more slips or issues, we will open by the end of next week.
So there was a slip on the 24th of April, right? And then there was another slip on Sunday.
Correct. So on the 24th, we actually had 2 slips. And the one that happened on Sunday happened at the same location as the smaller of the 2 that happened on the 24th.
Look, when was this road built? 1870-something, wasn't it? It was a remarkable piece of engineering at the time. But by God, you and I both know that this is so slip-prone. And is there a plan B?
Well, we have had a series of options looked at in the past, and the result of that report was to upgrade the alternative road, which is the Saddle Road. Once we've got this gorge open, we will go back and have another look at those options and see what our best options are for going forward.
OK, what are the best options, do you think?
It's a bit hard to tell at this point in time. Obviously, no matter what we do, we'll be working with the same kind of material, the same difficult locations as we are with Manawatu Gorge. So it's not going to be a simple, this option is much better than the others. OK,
the Saddle Road, I think the word resilience was used. So you are going to spend some money on making the Saddle Road a better alternative route when the gorge is closed?
Yes, that's correct. And the Tararua District Council have been running a contract for us using a local contractor, and they've spent something like $7 million to date of an $8.5 million project, and they've done a great job. The Saddle Road at the moment is looking really good. They've just got 2 more sections to upgrade. OK. Let's go back to the gorge. It was closed for the best part of a year, 2011-12, closed for a month in 2015, closed for almost a month now. It's State Highway 3, and as you know, and as everyone in the region knows, it connects Palmerston North with a whole lot of service centres and farmland. And it's the way through. It's the way through from the west to the east of the country, or back the other way. Is it good enough that it keeps being closed? It's a situation where we have got a really difficult geology to work with, and I do agree with it. Every time it closes, it does have a negative impact on the economy of both Manawatu, Wanganui and Hawke's Bay regions, and obviously that connection to the port as well. So, we get frustrated with having to go back in and clear it all the time, but we also appreciate that our customers are getting very frustrated with having to take the alternative route. Yeah, they absolutely are. So let's end by saying, when will there be a kind of definitive proposal that you can take to the councils, that you can talk to the government about funding? When do you think you'll be able to put that on the table? It's too difficult to say at this stage. I mean, we have to go back through all those options, look at other options and see really what the best option out of all those alternatives are. It's a bit difficult to say at this point in time before we even start looking at them again to say just how long that's going to take. It could take ages, couldn't it, Ross? Well, hopefully not, but as I say, It's a bit hard to say because we haven't actually started looking at those options and just really understanding what the issues are with each of them, as well as the benefits.
Ross, I don't want to give you a hard time, but the issues haven't changed, have they? I mean, the gorge was closed in 11, 12 was closed in 15, it's closed in 17. There are no new issues. They're the same old issues. People just want an alternative.
Oh, absolutely. There was the alternative options that I was talking about in terms of those issues. I mean, the gorge, you're right, same issues, and they always will be the same issues in terms of slips. But it's the issues that we will find and the benefits we'll find with each of those alternative options.
Ross Ainson speaking to us earlier. The All Blacks are to lose the services of long-serving and highly successful assistant coach Wayne Smith after this year's rugby championship. A former All Black himself, Smith has announced he'll be taking a break from October to consider his future, ending an international coaching involvement which began 18 years ago. Low-key, not that keen on being interviewed, Smith's regarded as one of the most astute rugby minds in the sport. Our sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
And the ball is in touch. The All Blacks celebrating already. Rugby World Cup history. First team to go back-to-back.
The former All Black Wayne Smith is regarded as one of the game's smartest minds. He helped oversee World Cup wins in 2011 and 2015, alongside head coaches Sir Graham Henry and Steve Hansen, respectively. His most recent brief has been working on the All Blacks' defensive pattern. But Smith says having turned 60 last month, it prompted him to think about his future.
You've got to stay hungry, you've got to be totally committed, and I am that. I'm just getting to a point where at some stage you're going to have to finish, and I want to finish before I lose that ability. So, and I know deep inside myself that it's right.
Smith says it's difficult to single out a particular highlight in his coaching career.
I see the jersey as a gem, you know, that you've got to keep polishing and keep making better, and so it used to annoy me a wee bit when Steve and Graham Henry and I were coaching together from 2004 to 2011. We won 89 tests out of 103, but we were hopeless apparently until we won the World Cup, and the World Cup win in 2011 seemed to legitimise everything else we'd done, which I didn't think was right.
It's clear All Blacks coach Steve Hansen would like Smith to continue, but says he's run out of excuses to keep luring Smith back. It's become increasingly obvious over the past couple of years that Smith wanted to step back, and Hansen says it came to a head recently.
I knew I couldn't convince him anymore when he went to my wife and said, look, you need to help me convince him to stop pressurising me to re-sign. So at that point I gave up, but we've squeezed a few more years out of him and I'm very thankful for that.
Steve Hansen and Wayne Smith have a long history, going back to their playing days for Canterbury in the 80s, although Smith says they weren't always on the best of terms.
Training wasn't going too well and he was kicking the ball around the middle of the field with Dion Kerr, I think, and I told him to bugger off to come back when he was ready to train. He's got a different version, but that's the true version.
Bullshit.
And I had to ring him to get him back.
So the search for a replacement now begins, and while New Zealand Rugby will advertise the position globally, Steve Hansen expects there to be several local candidates.
I think you've always got to be open with your thinking. Obviously, you know, you've got some people, not just a person, but some people, you know, that are clearly indicating that they're possibly ready, but you've got to be flexible in your thinking. You don't know what's going to drop out of the sky, so we haven't shoulder-tapped anybody.
Before he goes, though, Wayne Smith has a couple of major assignments to help guide the All Blacks through. They have their first test of the year against Samoa next month and then head into a 3-test series against the British and Irish Lions. Following that, there's the Rugby Championship against Australia, South Africa and Argentina, with Smith's last test being against the Springboks in September. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
Pretty remarkable contribution to the All Blacks, Wayne Smith. Authorities are ruling out terrorism after a speeding car ploughed into pedestrians on a footpath in New York's Times Square, killing one person and injuring 22 others. Whilst initial speculation centred on the jihadist-inspired vehicle as weapon attacks in Nice and London, this appears not to have been linked to any external group at all. The driver has previous convictions for drunk driving, Jonah Green reports.
The driver of the car that plowed into pedestrians at New York's Times Square is in custody. Richard Rojas, a 26-year-old Bronx resident, drove his car against traffic on the sidewalk on 7th Avenue in the busy center of Manhattan, killing an 18-year-old woman and injuring 22 more people.
And there were bodies scattered everywhere, a lot of lacerations, broken bones, people bleeding.
Officials say Rojas has a criminal record, including 2 arrests for drunk driving.
Based on the information we have at this moment, there is no indication that this was an act of terrorism.
Thomson Reuters employee Josh Duboff witnessed the moment the car mounted the curb.
And people were yelling, and some moved out of the way right away. Some people kind of got stuck on the car as he was driving up, and I was able to jump away as he was coming close to me.
The car drove through crowds for 3 blocks and crashed into a pole at 45th Street. Local media reporting the driver appeared intoxicated. FBI is working with local police to investigate the incident.
That report from Reuters at 6 minutes to 6 on a Friday night on Checkpoint. And who doesn't love a good wedding? It's been billed as the wedding of the year. There are lots of weddings of the year, aren't there? Pippa Middleton's wedding to the hedge fund manager James Matthews will take place tomorrow at her parents' Berkshire estate. Haggis, canopies, bagpipes and whiskey will be on the menu. I don't think they're eating the bagpipes. In a nod to the groom's Scottish heritage, and Prince George and Princess Charlotte as page boy and flower girl are expected to draw almost as much attention as the bride. John Haley is the publican at the old Boot Inn, which is the Middleton family's local pub. He went to Kate and William's wedding and has known Pippa since she was 9 years old. He described the excitement of the impending nuptials to our producer Bridget Burke.
Pippa's parents have been by quite recently. They sort of low profile in the last couple of weeks because it's all, you know, the media have gone crazy around here, so you've got to understand, you know, they got to have a low profile. But yeah, they're fabulous people, absolutely great people. Mike, I've got a load of respect for. He's A1.
You were invited to William and Catherine's wedding.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And you went?
Yeah, I went. Of course I went. You know, you can't sort of get an invite to that wedding and not go. Yeah, it's fabulous, unbelievable.
And have you had an invitation to Pippa's wedding?
No, I'm afraid I haven't. No, I missed out on that. It was a bit sad.
Is the crowd a little more exclusive for this event, do you think, John?
Yeah, maybe. They don't want to sort of public them from Sanford Dingley. But we're going to have a big party here on Saturday. So the wedding is at 11:30. And we've got a load of people coming in. I've got a load of champagne on ice. And we're all going to toast Pippa and James. And we're going to have a massive party here. Lunchtime is going to go right through the day. We've got our fingers crossed the weather's going to be okay. But, you know, I think we're going to get some rain. But we've got some music in the garden. It's going to be a great fun day.
Your pub, the old Boot Inn, is the family's favourite local.
Yeah, they've been coming here. I've been here for 21 years this month, actually. Actually, it's this weekend, so that's we're going to celebrate that as well. So I've been here 21 years this weekend, and they've been coming in here all that time, and I've known them all that time. As you say, I went to the wedding, Kate and William's wedding, and they still come in, and they're absolutely fabulous family. You know, they come in and they have whatever they want.
You will have known Pippa since she was a wee tot.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so what age is she now? She's about 30, isn't she? 32, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I've known her since they were quite young.
And has James been in, her fiancé?
Yeah, James has been in, yeah. Met James a couple of times. Seems a nice guy, yeah, and I'm sure they're going to have a, you know, really happy life together.
The local church where they're going to get married, do you know that well?
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there to, as I say, I've been here 21 years now, and I've been there to a couple of weddings. It's a lovely church. I'm sure you've seen it on online and on TV, but it's a fabulous church. It's quite small. I'm not sure how many people they got coming, but yeah, it's a really lovely church, a lovely village. And then they're going to go there. I think they're going to go to Englefield to have some lunch, and then they're going back to the Middleton's house to have a party in the evening.
Why do you think it's such a big deal, this wedding?
Well, you don't need to ask me that, do you? Because sort of Kate is her sister, and they've got Kate's children as page boy and page boy and what?
Flower girl?
Yeah, flower girl, page boy and flower girl. So that's, you know, and Pippa, you know, what a lovely arse she had when she went down the wedding. She was sort of all over the world. So yeah, Kate's her sister, and there you go. It'd be interesting to see on Saturday, you know, what's going to happen. I think it's going to go mad.
Katrina and I are just recovering from that. What a lovely arse she had. Goodness gracious me. I'm not entirely convinced that's respectful, Katrina Batten.
He could have said bum.
Yeah. And also, apparently, I've been told I said canopies. Obviously, they're canapes made with peas. So I don't know what's wrong with the people who are complaining about that. Green canapes. It's coming up to, actually we've got a little bit of time before the 6 o'clock news, and we are just getting reports of a pretty nasty collision. I'm just trying to find out, we're just trying to make calls on this and find out more about it. It's in northern Waikato, Te Kauwhata or thereabouts, near or off State Highway 1. So that's Te Kauwhata is northern Waikato, south of Auckland. A number of vehicles have been involved. I think 5 people are injured. Unconfirmed reports coming in of 1 dead. We're making calls on that. Pretty nasty collision. 5 serious injuries and 1 unconfirmed fatality. That report just coming in from North Waikato, south of Auckland. Lots of feedback coming in tonight. What is it? Why is it whenever the Manawatu Gorge becomes closed, the perfectly good rail line on the other side of the river is never mentioned? Passenger trains for many years on this line connecting Gisborne and Hawke's Bay with Palmerston North and Wellington and the many towns along the route. Not everyone can or wants to drive, and buses are not a pleasant alternative. But we did also get a piece of feedback from somebody who says, look, rocks fall on the road. That's no one's fault. Get the rocks off, reopen the road, shut up and get on with it. Thank you for your feedback. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ on Friday night.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. 3 young men and a teenage boy have been charged in the youth court in Manukau with the violent robbery of a mangere superette on Tuesday night. The men, aged 17, 18 and 20, and a 15-year-old boy were jointly charged this afternoon with aggravated robbery. A worker was punched and kicked and cigarettes were stolen. 3 of the 4 accused have been remanded in custody to reappear in the youth court next Thursday, and the 4th is still to be dealt with. The Public Service Association says the responsibility for privacy problems at the Social Development Ministry goes much wider than one person. The Ministry's acting Deputy Chief Executive, Murray Edridge, has resigned, saying he takes responsibility for the Ministry not adequately protecting personal information provided by community groups and seeking funding. The PSA's National Secretary, Glenn Barclay, says it's unfair Mr Edridge is taking the full blame.
The main driver is, government policy around this, because government can put quite an inordinate amount of pressure on ministries and departments when their pet policies are involved, and I think that this is an example of that.
Glenn Barclay, an investigation has found a temporary IT project set up by the ministry lacked proper leadership and resourcing, and its security risks weren't properly checked. A man who tried to lure 3 young girls into his van in Christchurch today first followed them down the street. The police say the Queen's Park school pupils were approached on their way to school this morning. The man followed them along Broadhaven Avenue in his van and then demanded they get in. The children refused, carried on to school and told teachers what had happened. Constable Kenneth Marriott says the man is described as Māori or Pacifica, in his 30s, with a blue and green tattoo of a flame on his face. He was driving a white van with a black strip and the letter K on both sides. A woman whose daughter was killed in a car crash says she's relieved justice has been done following the driver's jailing for 5 years. Damien Lawson was sentenced in the High Court in Wellington today for reckless driving causing death. Here's our court reporter Anne-Marie May.
Damien Lawson had been smoking methamphetamine before the crash and sped away when a police car approached. He hit a motorway overbridge in Porirua but continued driving recklessly, then lost control of the car, which crashed into a tree, causing massive injuries to his 21-year-old passenger. The woman died during surgery. In a statement released this afternoon, her mother said her daughter's death was totally preventable and she lost her life due to Lawson's actions. She said she hopes during his time in prison he will never forget the hurt, harm and devastation he has caused. This is Anne-Marie May.
The Prime Minister is spending the day in Hong Kong today, pitching New Zealand as a good place to invest. Bill English is holding a series of meetings with local economists and the heads of some major multinational corporations in the hope they'll consider investing in the government's planned infrastructure projects. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell, reports from Hong Kong.
Bill English says his message to companies in Hong Kong is that New Zealand is open to investment, trade and migration, but he concedes the country's tight regulations are a bit of a put-off for foreign investors. He says Hong Kong-based companies will not get any special treatment and will have to meet the same requirements as other foreign investors. Mr English says while he won't be pitching specific projects, roading is the biggest single category of the infrastructure needing investment. The Prime Minister leaves Hong Kong to return to New Zealand tomorrow. In Hong Kong, Chris Bramwell.
The new home of the Treaty of Waitangi was unveiled at the National Library in Wellington today, along with the 1835 Declaration of Independence and the 1893 Women's Suffrage Petition. It can now be seen by the public in an exhibition called He Tohu. Speaking at the opening, the Governor-General, Dame Patsy Reddy, said giving women the vote in 1893 was a monumental shift in human rights.
We should heed Kate Shepherd's call to exercise such a hard-won right. She said, "Do not think your single vote does not matter much. The rain that refreshes the ground is made up of single drops."
Dame Patsy Reddy. He Tohu will be open 6 days a week. Entry is free. A Whanganui school is refusing to comment on the case of a mother who claimed her 10-year-old epileptic daughter was being bullied. The mother, Tony Ann, posted on Facebook that an entire class at the school turned down invitations to her daughter's birthday party. She set up a Facebook page eliciting support, money and presents from around the world. But other parents at the school told Checkpoint the girl is not being bullied. Rachel, the mother of a girl in the same class, says no invitations were ever sent for a birthday party. The mother declined to comment when approached by RNZ News. It's 6:05. To sport, and the All Blacks assistant coach Wayne Smith says he wants to step down from the job before he loses the passion required to push the team forward. Smith announced today he'll leave at the end of this year's Rugby Championship after a 20-year involvement with the All Blacks as player and coach.
You do want to leave, a positive legacy, and to do that, you've got to stay hungry. The jersey demands that you've got that absolute drive and commitment and hunger. And I'm at the point where, after 20 years, I'm ready to refresh. I might rotate back into rugby at some point, but it's time for a bit of hiatus.
Wayne Smith. In Super Rugby tonight, the unbeaten Crusaders play the Chiefs in Suva. Wellington Phoenix co-coaches Des Buckingham and Chris Greenacre have missed out on getting the job permanently. The pair were appointed interim coaches when Ernie Merrick resigned mid-season. The club's general manager, David Dome, says a contract has been signed with an overseas coach, but there'll be no announcement on who it is until next month. The Warriors will be aiming to put last weekend's horrendous loss behind them when they play St George Illawarra in Hamilton tonight. The Warriors, who surrendered a 22-point lead to Newcastle, are 12th on the NRL ladder. The Dragons are 5th. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Zen and the Art of Max Gimblett. Tommy Rattigan's close encounter with Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, the Moors murderers. And Ariel Levy thought she had it all and then lost it in the most painful way. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow from Northland to Taranaki and Taihape, including Bay of Plenty. Occasional showers heavy for a time tomorrow with snow about the desert road, then clearing in the afternoon or evening. Gisborne, fine today, a few showers around midday tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Nelson, mainly fine today. A cold southerly change early tomorrow with rain and snow to 600 metres, then mostly clearing, but showers remaining about Wairarapa and Mahia Peninsula. Marlborough and Canterbury, a strong cold southerly change this evening with rain and snow to 200 metres for a time in the south. Becoming mostly fine tomorrow morning, but snow showers and southwest gales on Banks Peninsula. Bulla and Westland, showers with snow to 600 metres, clearing tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, frequent showers with thunder and hail and snow to low levels tonight. Severe gales about coastal Southland and Clutha, easing a little later today. And the Chatham Islands, showers heavy at times with thunder tomorrow, westerly gales overnight. It's 6:08, and that's the first time I've read snow in the weather forecast this year.
Gosh, yeah, it's a cold southerly coming across the country, isn't it?
Yeah, with snow flurries, so
yeah.
Wrap up warm, South Island.
Thank you, Katrina Batten. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thank you. Confirmation of one person is dead and 5 injured after a really nasty car crash in Te Kawhata in the North Waikato, south of Auckland. St John's are at the scene. 5 ambulances, in fact, are there. If we get more details, we will bring them to you, but RNZ will obviously update that throughout the night. We are returning now to our story about a 10th birthday party. It's a story that's gone absolutely global after the child's mother told Fairfax and NZME that her daughter, who suffered from epilepsy, had been severely bullied and nobody in her class wanted to come to her birthday party. A Facebook page was set up in support of the little girl and now has 5,000 followers, and presents money and messages of support came in from New Zealand and overseas. One question that didn't seem to have been answered was, what was the school doing to deal with such terrible bullying? Well, Checkpoint wanted to ask the girls' school, and when we started making inquiries, we learned there were no outstanding bullying issues at the school, and nobody was coming to the party because no invitations had been sent out. This woman set up the original Facebook page in response to the story. I asked her why she got involved.
I felt sad for that she wasn't going to have a birthday party that she deserves. Every little girl deserves a birthday party, and just to know that she had no friends and got bullied, I just felt like, yeah, she deserves an extra special day.
So you decided, because I think like everyone who read that story, you were terribly upset by it, that you would help a special day.
Yes.
And what has been the response to this story and the party that you have worked so hard and so kindly to organise?
It's been worldwide, actually. There's messages from, everywhere, actually. I don't think there's a country that's not involved at the moment.
How many presents have come in? Do you have any idea?
I don't actually have an idea because I'm not in the same town, but I estimate at this stage maybe over 500, but I'm not sure.
And cash, any money?
A lot of money, donations. I know there's most likely money in birthday cards. And
so people have been incredibly kind, right?
Absolutely, but I think for me it's more the videos and, the kind thoughts and people sharing their story, which might be a big thing for some people to do, but they've done it.
These are other kids who've been bullied, right? And the parents of children who've been bullied.
Oh, yes, definitely. And those stories are heartbreaking. Some of them definitely have no friends and they get beaten up at school. And, yeah, it's quite heartbreaking, actually.
And they've shared their stories in kind of solidarity.
Yeah, absolutely. There's videos upon videos of so many kids that, even kind-hearted kids that have just taken time out of their day and, oh my goodness, they're adorable, to sing happy birthday or tell she's a beautiful girl, and how they would be a friend if they were here, and don't listen to the bullies, fight the bullies. And
now that you've got this extraordinary response, you also have learnt something else. How much of the original story do you now believe is true?
Well, from what I understand, a lot of the story isn't true. There was no invitation sent, but no invitations were sent for a party, and she wasn't called a retard, for giving out invitations.
So the children say they're not going to come to her party. Your sense is that hadn't happened.
No, that isn't true.
That there were no invitations?
No.
This is a little bit heartbreaking, isn't it?
The worst bit for me is that when people find out about this, I think there's only 5,000 on, this is going to make everybody lose their faith in anybody. To me, that's the most heartbreaking part. All these kids, I hope people don't tell their kids so, all these adults that have donated presents from all over the world, it's hard to trust anyone these days anyway, but this is just going to ruin, everyone's faith in everyone, and especially what I don't want it to affect is people trying to fight bullying, because that's a true story. There's kids every day getting bullied. You just see on the net people dying from being bullied, and gosh, now when people say they're getting bullied, I hope people still believe them.
Now, Checkpoint has chosen not to name the child's school, but the school has told us it has a robust bullying policy and there are no outstanding bullying issues. The child's mother declined repeated requests to be interviewed today, but said she would be available to speak on Monday. The principals of 5 Dunedin schools where increased lead levels have been found in soil tests say there's no need to panic. GNS Science found soil samples from the schools contain lead levels higher than the recommended government level for home gardens. Lydia Anderson reports from Dunedin.
Public health officials have been visiting the 5 affected schools to check out the areas where contaminated soil samples were taken, but principals say they're reassured by the outcome. Mornington School Principal Brent Caldwell says his school has informed parents about the GNS findings, but the students haven't been told.
The information is really for parents of children, and the kids are not getting any specific teaching around that today, because I think to do that would probably be a wee bit premature, particularly in terms of children who may have concerns or may be anxious about that kind of thing.
He says teachers have been reminding students to wash their hands after playing outside. Ōpaho School Principal Jenny Clark says her school had previously carried out its own soil tests when it decided to plant a vegetable garden. She says they found evidence of lead in the soil near the site of the old school incinerator, but other areas were clear, and no students will be going near the GNS sampled area.
The area that's concerning, or that has had the traces of lead identified here, is an out-of-bounds area anyway, because it's actually near the boiler room and it's well grassed, so that's definitely the other mitigating thing that can be done for areas like this. So we think this is a low level situation.
A GNS spokesperson says the samples were initially taken as part of a wider study looking at the makeup of Dunedin soil. When results came back from an overseas laboratory showing raised lead levels, GNS sent them on to health officials and schools were quickly notified. Lincoln University soil scientist Brett Robinson says it's not unusual to find lead in the soil in New Zealand. A study he conducted into Christchurch residential properties revealed levels as high as 2,500 milligrams of lead per litre of soil. That's almost 10 times higher than recommended government level.
I want to emphasise that it's not a reason to panic. It seems to be a completely normal concentration in an urban soil. It's contaminated through historic use of lead. There are certain precautions you can take if you want to limit your exposure to lead, which is always a good idea because lead's a cumulative poison. So peeling root vegetables is important, and washing leafy vegetables so that there's not dust on them.
A Dunedin Medical Officer of Health, Dr Marion Poor, agrees but says public health officials are taking a precautionary approach.
Given that we believe that this is not an uncommon problem in the city, it may be that it's quite appropriate to make sure that we've mitigated any risk as best we can and not get too sort of bogged down with testing.
She says the GNS sampled soil doesn't necessarily mean entire school premises have raised lead levels.
One sample was taken from the site, so you get that result from that particular place, and it could well be that if you sampled another part of the property, the levels would be much lower. So there's going to be variability across the site anyway.
Dr Poor says once all the school visits have been done, her team will determine if any further testing is needed. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
The High Court in Wellington has been told that the son of the Kohanga-Reo matriarch, Dame Iritana Tawhiwhirangi, tried to blackmail the Kohanga-Reo National Trust for $800,000. Rakai Tawhiwhirangi is said to have demanded money from the trust when his wife Linda was dismissed as general manager of its commercial arm, Te Pātaka Ohanga, for misusing her credit card. The events have been revealed in a case where former trustee Tony Waho is challenging his dismissal as a trustee in 2014. Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
The court has been told that Rakai Tawhiwhirangi presented a list of allegations against trustees and directors to his mother, board member Dame Iritana Tawhiwhirangi. The list included allegations that an expensive car had been purchased for a VIP and that person's honorarium payments had been hidden to avoid media scrutiny. It included allegations of misuse of taxi chits, loans, and that 2 bosses and their partners went to China on a work trip that achieved nothing. Former Te Pātaka Ohanga director and trustee Drewis Barrett said Mr Tawhiwhirangi demanded $800,000 or he'd take the list to the media.
That was the reason why that conference call was called that evening, to discuss the fact that Linda Tawhiwhirangi, or we shouldn't dismiss her because the Rakai list would condemn a whole lot of people.
The Trust co-chair Tina Olsen-Ratana said she wasn't told about a demand for money when Dame Iritana gave her the list. She thought it was a matter for Te Pātaka Ohanga, which was dealing with Linda Tawhiwhirangi's dismissal, and not the Trust.
I handed it to Juris Barrett, who I knew was leading the disciplinary processes around Linda. I handed it to Juris Barrett on the basis because the way he had given it, and obviously it was part of that whole, at the time, around that disciplinary process.
Around that time, there were 3 investigations underway into the Trust and Te Pātaka Ohanga, including Ernst & Young, Internal Affairs and the KPMG. Former trustee Tony Waho's lawyer Felix Geiringer said Mr Waho was worried that some trustees were considering paying to keep it quiet.
If somebody has said to you, I want you to give me a large sum of money as part of an employment settlement or otherwise, or I'm going to go to the media with lots of complaints, lots of allegations about your organisation, some of which I'll suggest are quite clearly, if they're true, quite clearly criminal, and you say, OK, let's talk about how much money. There's all sorts of problems with that.
The Trust co-chair, Dr Timothy Karitu, said the allegations were either false and old news or weren't serious, including one about himself living rent-free in Wellington.
I was acting chief executive of the Trust, as well as the chair of the Trust Board, for about a year, sometime between about 2002 and 2003. During that period, I lived in a rented apartment in Wellington that was provided and paid for by the Trust. This was part of my remuneration package. My understanding is that the Trust was of the view that it would be cheaper for me to stay in a rental property rather than a hotel, given that I was required to spend so much time in Wellington when I did not normally live there. When Nedi Hiko was appointed as the new chief executive of the Trust, I vacated the apartment.
Without the board's knowledge, Mr Waho sent a letter to then Education Minister Hikia Parata to tell her the list existed. That launched a serious fraud office investigation into Te Pātaka Ohanga. But the Trust's lawyer, Nick Russell, told the court that the list was provided to the SFO, which found no criminal activity.
The allegations that Mr Tawhiwhirangi made did not, in fact, disclose any serious wrongdoing at all within either the Trust or TPO. Secondly, the allegations did not require immediate investigation, partly because they weren't serious in the first place, partly because they had arisen in the context of an employment dispute that was being managed.
However, Mr Geiringer said there are questions about the scope of the investigation, and Mr Waho doesn't think the list has been properly looked into. The court heard that all of the trustees, bar one, will step down by the end of the year. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Marma McLaughlin tēnei.
21 minutes past 6. Just quickly before we move on, NZTA have just advised us that delays on State Highway 1 from Parramatta to Paikakariki, north of Wellington, of course, are now around 70 minutes. So if you're sitting in the car thinking of leaving Wellington, stop and go and do something else for a little while. 70 minutes, Parramatta to Paikakariki, the delays now. State Highway 1 heading north. A Waikato builder is upsetting the neighbours with earthworks they say have caused damage to their properties. One Hamilton homeowner says digging on a neighbouring property has produced a gaping hole beside his house, while another says the unearthing of springs has caused flooding on her property. What's going on here? Joe O'Brien reports.
Neil Pitts says the house built on his neighbour's property had caused an earlier landslip on his property. But the last straw came when he returned home a week ago.
To find a digger digging away our dirt, which had fallen into his property when he removed all his soil. So I requested them to stop, which they did. They loaded up and left. The next day they put up a plywood shield fence to hide it from the general public. Well, that's my belief anyhow.
Mr Pitts says what the builder David Reid Homes Waikato was trying to hide is a huge hole that resulted, measuring 10 metres long, 2 metres deep and up to 1 metre wide, that's also left pipes exposed on his property. He says his lawyer has written to the company about the damage, but has received no response.
We honestly don't have a problem with him building a house. It's just the way he's gone around building it, and he's just big smiley when all the dirt fell over, and now it's easy for him to build a retainer wall because he doesn't have to retain what was there existing.
David Reid Homes Waikato says all work on the River Road site has been carried out within building code regulations and with the required engineering oversight. In a written statement, Managing Director Ben Green says they were building a channel close to the border of Mr Pitt's property so they could erect a retaining wall.
Unfortunately, there was unexpected subsidence which impacted his property. We apologise for any inconvenience and distress this may have caused. It remains our intention to reinstate the land along Mr Pitt's border to how it was previously. We've been in constant communication with Mr Pitt through this process.
But David Reid Homes Waikato is also frustrating another Hamilton homeowner. Lynn Aitkenhead says the builder has unearthed springs on her neighbour's property, but has failed to stop water from the springs flowing into neighbouring backyards when it rains.
It's bringing all the water and the silt through from that property, and as I understand it, part of the consenting process was that was to be contained within the project's property where the new build is.
David Reid Homes Waikato is denying the silt and water flows have been caused by their build, but Lynn Aitkenhead says there is nowhere else it can be coming from. She's also dissatisfied with a lack of action by Hamilton City Council to their complaints, a dissatisfaction that's shared by Neil Pitts. He says he's also been in touch with the council, along with Occupational Safety and Health, the Earthquake Commission and his insurance company. But he's frustrated nobody seems able to help.
Oh, totally pissed. Totally pissed. It's just red tape. We just can't do anything. We just got to sit here and watch. They're there today digging. They're just digging, like how much are they going to dig away before things actually do move?
But Hamilton City Council Building Unit Manager Corey Lang says a building compliance officer visited the site within 2 hours of receiving Mr Pitt's complaint and found no risk to the structural integrity of the property. He says all due care should be taken with excavations, but it is challenging to determine how soils will behave.
Until such time as you start your soil excavation, it is difficult to understand how that soil is going to perform. That does not mean or allow risks to be imposed on neighbouring properties. And in fact, in this case, we don't believe that there is any safety risk to the neighbour's property.
And Hamilton for Checkpoint, ko Joe O'Brien tēnei.
Well, New Zealand's Youth America's Cup team is making the most of any practice it can get ahead of the regatta in Bermuda next month. All eyes are on Team New Zealand, that's the grown-ups, but closer to home, the youth squad, made up of 6 up-and-coming sailors, is still taking to the water in Auckland. New Zealand won the Youth Cup with Pete Burling, who's of course now at Team New Zealand, at the helm in 2013, something this year's squad is hoping to recreate. Sally Murphy, lucky her, went out on a practice run.
Unlike Bermuda, conditions aren't tropical in Auckland, but that doesn't stop our Youth America's Cup team from taking to the water. During the Cup, the team will compete in an AC-45 foiling catamaran that can get up to at least 37 knots. But with that boat already in Bermuda, the team is practising on a 32-foot catamaran. Skipper Logan Dunning-Beck says despite practising on a different boat, the team is coming together well.
Pretty well, considering sort of how hard it is to simulate the 45 sailing, so we've spent a fair bit of time trying to figure out how to sail the GC like it's a 45, just to get the kind of period in Bermuda isn't wasted just getting used to the boat.
In 2013, Peter Burling, Blair Chute, Andy Maloney and Guy Endine, who are all in Team New Zealand's crew this year, took part in the Youth Cup. Beck says they're following on from a strong bunch, which gives the team more reason to prove themselves.
It's a sort of a bit of inspiration, especially seeing those guys, and they've been just next door here when we've been heading out at the beginning of this before they left for Bermuda, so yeah, it's quite inspiring. And I mean, we all know the guys who came through last time, and it's a good opportunity, and there's a bit of public awareness because they won last time, so I think it's a bit easier for us to find support, both financially and just from people giving us a hand.
Beck is sailing alongside Stuart Dodson, Isaac McHardy, Matt Kempkes, Luca Brown, Harry Hull and Michael Wilkinson. 20-year-old Wilkinson, the offside tactician, says with 12 teams taking part, the competition is strong this year.
At the moment, the two favourites are probably the Swiss and the British team. They've done a lot of sailing together on foiling catamarans, so they're probably the two teams to beat. But you know, it's kind of going to be high intensity racing, and there's going to be a lot of mistakes being made around the course. So you know, we think if we can minimise them, we've got a good shot.
Wilkinson says they're aiming to sail 3 times a week and get to the gym 4 or 5 times a week before they leave for Bermuda at the start of June.
Upper body strength is massive, and basically on board the boat we pull a lot of ropes, so having a good grip strength and a good pulling strength is quite important, and these boats are extremely physical, so good cardio level of fitness and good strength is critical.
Yachting New Zealand CEO Dave Abercrombie says the Youth America's Cup is proving to be a vital pathway for young sailors wanting to get into the competitive and Olympic sailing circuits.
Here again, another incredibly talented bunch of kids coming through. What I see with them is incredible capability, enthusiasm and skill sets that, even compared with the 2013 team, probably have lifted again.
The Youth Cup team head to Bermuda on the 1st of June with the hope of making the finals on the 20th and 21st. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
And that is it from Checkpoint for this week. Thank you for being with us throughout the week on RNZ, watching us on Freeview Channel 50, Face TV, Sky Channel 83. We're just going to show a shot of the control room. That is Kelvin, Blair and Pip, the boss who was trying to hide. Out in the office is Bridget Burke, Michelle Cook, Zach Fleming, our reporter, and Catherine Warbridge, our associate producer. It's a wonderful team. I'm proud to work with them, and we will be all back with you after what we hope is a lovely and restful weekend at 5 o'clock on Monday night. Until then, thank you for joining us, and a very good weekend indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. 3 young men and a teenage boy have been charged with the violent robbery of a Mangere superette. A man who tried to lure 3 young girls into his van in Christchurch today first followed them down the street and demanded they get in. Regional mayors from Manawatu and Hawke's Bay are to discuss the problems with the Manawatu Gorge road. The road has been closed since mid-April after a landslip. And a woman whose daughter was killed in a car crash says she's relieved justice has been done after the driver was jailed. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country Life this week meets a couple of enterprising women who were spurred into action when they received a miserable wool check.
And we sat here and thought, it's got to be something better than that.
So they started to make old-fashioned woolen blankets.
It's been pulled through the calf sheds, it's been pulled through the chicken sheds, it goes everywhere. I remember a lady called me, she was in such a panic. Oh, my baby's vomited on the blanket, and I was like,